So, A Bend in the River, a self-described political fiction, written by a man named V.S Naipaul, a Trinidadian author who wrote 30 books in his 50 years. The book I'm speaking about today, though, was published in 2001 and it won him his Nobel Prize in the same year. The book details a Muslim Indian man named Salim who inherits a store from his good friend Nasruddin in a small town in a bend in the river. It's set in an unnamed African country. I imagine the said river is most likely the Congo River, somewhere about there. The book entails Salim's journey, his relationships with multiple people throughout the events that occur as Africa deals with colonialism and other historical events of the period, and how he and the environment adjusts, and as European powers begin to take influence and the more materialistic wants of European society begin to arrive in a previously uninfected Africa. A lot happens in this novel, but to no strict narrative. There's no cut and dry, straightforward story, as you're probably used to. A Bend in the River takes time to appreciate Africa for what it is, and space to see what it's becoming, and allows you to feel which way you want about the changes. All it asks is that you stay for the journey. This gives her a very different read to what I personally have experienced before. To speak on a negative, it's certainly abrasive at first, at least for a reader like me, who is used to fast-paced action, grabbing beginnings which make you really want to read on. It sounds strange, but A Bend in the River feels like it leaves the choice up to you. When I began to realise what Naipaul wanted me to experience, it made it a lot more gripping, but not in the usual way. I wanted to read on, because when I read, I was somewhere completely different, whether I was reading on the train, in bed, or anywhere else. More than anything else, when I was reading this book, it truly made me feel like I was deep in Africa. Somewhere so unfamiliar to me came to life around me, and this is one thing I believe the author is one of the best in the world at. I hope from this, you can appreciate the book for what it is, a window into somewhere else, and that's how I believe it should be read, because otherwise it can feel pretty slow. Personally, I would choose to read it at selective times. I was bored on the train and I wanted to forget I was on my daily commute, or just feeling low at home and I just wanted to be anywhere else. However, when I wanted a gripping story, thrilling plots and everything else, I turned to other novels, which provided that. I think this has to be understood by the reader, otherwise it can be quickly dismissed as drawn out and boring. But I personally appreciate the longing to include every detail Naipaul seems to possess, although I definitely couldn't read books like this all the time. So now how the book should be read is out of the way, I'll speak about the book. I don't want to spoil much, so I'll touch on key areas I thought elicited certain interests to me. First, I think, is the conflict that occurs throughout the country. It begins to affect the town Salim is inhabiting. However, what I found interesting was the little care he placed upon this. Now, not that he was carefree, as things like corruption and illegal fees were placed on him that he had to pay, but in general for his country, even though he's technically a foreigner, there is a sense that Salim loves this country, and he loves the land that he's made his home. So this disregard for the threat of conflict, and how it could shape his new home, struck me as odd. But I began to realise the differences between how someone like me, a teenager in the UK, and someone like Salim, a trader in Africa, feel about things like this. Salim knows that whatever happens in Africa, Africa will still be Africa to him, and change is necessary, or actually change is just a part of life, which challenged my own self in a way, in which I worry about most things won't always be the same forever, and that draws a negative connotation in my mind. But I enjoyed thinking about how Salim has a more positive or a more neutral standpoint on that. The other thing I'd like to talk about is the relationship with Yvette. It blossoms towards the end, and how I think it plays on what I've been speaking about so far. Salim meets a younger woman, I believe she's married, to Raymond, and Yvette encapsulates everything Salim believes the changing world to be. She's beautiful, she has exciting interests and big ambitions, and above all, she's a strong woman who knows what she wants. I think Salim likes this the most. Throughout the whole book, Salim is like a stick floating down a river, on his way, but everything has stood still for a while he watches everything happen around and he interacts with the youth, although he portrays them in a slightly negative light due to his perceived naivety that he believes them to hold. I believe this could also be a nod to jealousy that he has, that they have direction, albeit their motivation is misplaced and false idols. I definitely think he is envious of direction, in which a stick floating down a river does not possess. I think the book demonstrates a large portion where he is stuck at this bend. But when the final page closes, he is free to float on down the river, and you part ways with his journey forever. But the journey was nice, and one I think you should all experience casually. But who am I to tell you what to do? I've been Luca. Thanks for listening.